Alrighty, guys. Good afternoon. I had to just finish up a quick phone call there. An interesting day. Very interesting day today. Coming from where we left off, we ended up continuing to pull back a bit, whipping off that, and then basically just finishing the day off, break even from that low. Um, this mostly due from what we saw this morning, which is that there's basically no volume today at all. You just look across the board, there's basically nothing. And this is why you see a lot of the individual tickers were making a lot of big moves. We were very bit off the start of the day. Uh, Watching that, it did really look, and this can be definitely could be somewhere where if you were not already in, you could get caught off guard, which is exactly how momentum works. Everything looks like momentum just going to continue and it's going to push through. We got rejected at the trend line. I was seeing that the volume compared to yesterday is just significantly lower compared to the usual, and especially what we've talked about is that with the long term trading view that we have right now, trading view, it's it's causing this Monday focus where you put all your trades at the beginning of the week, uh, wait through the rest of the week, see on Friday what to do, and then you're either holding those positions or you're looking to then transition them to enter again on Monday, and you're repositioning, doing these different things from a trading perspective. And we're seeing that really come sort of playing out today. It doesn't mean that it has to lead to downside if there's less volume, but what it does mean is that it's hard to break levels. What we see is that to break out of a trend line or to break out of a resistance, it takes more volume than the average to actually push through that. Because otherwise you just have you have a average amount of sellers that are sitting at that resistance, which would be really the trend line here today. And as soon as we are not able to have enough demand to push through that, which is really a volume centric sort of idea to have, again, demand outweigh the supply, that supply is just sitting there. There are orders just ready. And this is where we saw orders actually start to go towards the bid side. And it seemed like we were going to be able to whip off of that low. We ended up whipping down in this area. Um, which kind of proves sort of the point that you see there, which is the spread starts to widen because the volume comes down. And then as soon as it reaches equilibrium, it now goes to the upside just as quick, which is what causes that whipsaw sort of phenomena. Instead, we traded flat on the day. Again, when you look at it overall, we had a very good day yesterday. Two important things are we still had a higher low and we had a higher high for all major indices. And so things look very good. And it does look like we're just on the trajectory to trade within this trend line. This can still create an interesting dynamic where, as I said yesterday at close, you can open up above the resistance here, a little bit of a gap up, or we open right on the trend line and it lets us go bid very quickly through the open. We'll be watching for the same thing again tomorrow. We're continuing the trend though, and again, the thing here to remember is that we are right next to all-time high, and when you're this close to all-time high, again, things do pick up in, I would really say, speed. So you see up and down a lot more movement. If there's low volume again tomorrow, then I would suspect we're going to see something very similar to today, where spreads are a little wide. We see sort of this push one way or the other, continue through the day, and you saw lunch meant basically nothing. Lunch basically amounted to moving to the upside a bit just to come back to where we were to begin with. So an interesting day to look at on an intraday perspective. Again, showing why we don't need to really see what happens day to day or during intraday. It's really about over a weekly perspective. But everything trending to the upside. There wasn't anything that caused weakness or anything. Nasdaq did close up on the day, and so again, rebounding off of this low. Everything doing very well. Mega caps again really leading the way through. Even though Apple and Amazon are a little bit slower than the rest, even their positions still look very good. And I would say that the candle today on Amazon was really interesting. Again, we saw this push this morning that it actually seemed like we were gone. And this is where the whole market ended up not moving. And so you needed all the momentum to come through. We did see that. But this move here was interesting. If you actually look on the daily, you can't really see it on the intraday. we bounced right off this trend line. If I extend this, you'll see this here. We bounced right off the trend line in here and whip right back. And you actually saw what I was talking about where you get that big gap between the candles. We ended up not seeing that when I was talking about it because we didn't end up whipping back up at that point. But when the whipsaw did come through, you saw that we're off that low. All of those orders get filled at the bid and all of them get wiped out and everybody goes towards the ask side and that spread gets really wide again. And so I thought that was really interesting to see over here because again, this Amazon chart's in a very sort of peculiar spot compared to the rest because of the heavy amount of supply. It's supply that's been here for months and months, really since last year. And so as soon as you move through there, you could definitely put points on. I just want to bring up the other mega cap charts. Google yesterday had 3%. You would expect some take profit today. That did not happen. We continued to put points on, looking very good. Microsoft in a very similar position. The one thing to note here is that you have a bit of a, it's not so much a bearish candle, but when you get a doji candle or something like this here, it's usually pointing to the next candle is going to come down in relation, right? This is usually like a pivot point sort of candle, and this uptrend stops. That doesn't mean it's going to come all the way back down or something. It just means that the next candle usually sells to start in the day. We'll have to see. After hours are down after that, and this was one of the mega caps that were up on the day, so it looks like it's just sort of equalizing with the market. That may be literally all it is, but it is important to note when you see a candle like that, dojis usually mean a change of trend, and that can be in a short-term sense, longer-term sense, whether we're talking about intraday, 5-minute candles, whatever. But in terms of a daily perspective here, it would only be in relation to this 5-day trend here. Something like a short-term pattern we talk about, where it only really matters for the next candle, not the entire week or something like that, right? But it is something we're going to keep in mind that today we had such low volume, we couldn't push further. We're going to need to see more volume tomorrow. I mean, probably the one thing we'll look for all day is to, or really in the morning, is to see if that volume comes in. Otherwise, though, everything looked very good. A lot of the tickers that I posted from last night, did very well off the start. And the thing to remember here is that if you have those really long upper shadow wicks, this big wick here, that's all bid. We push price all the way up through here. That's a very good bullish indication, as long as it's not sort of at the top of a trend. Because if it was at the top of the trend, that may mean we're out of sort of bid. In this sort of circumstance where it's just out of a breakout and we're just getting going, it shows that we do have it. We have the ability to bid through, right? If you're willing to buy up there, then you're going to be willing to buy 1% or lower where we are right now, right? To finish off the day. And so across the board, we have these candles, and really it all came from that open. If again, we do that same open again tomorrow, it's most likely going to be different, right? You're not going to see something like that tomorrow if it happens again. The volume would just be a little bit different, right? It's going to be just a bit different, and we're a little bit, as you trade sideways, again, you're sort of gaining, you're gaining a new sort of territory, and you're pushing further and further out of that supply the further sideways you go, which is why sometimes we see that trading sideways leads to more upside, because again, you're working through that supply. So every single day you stay at the same price, even, or if you stay on the same trend, you're working through anybody on the sell side. You can only sell once, right? And so if it's at the same level, there's only so many sell side orders there. Once those are gone, you can continue. We see a lot of that sort of already showing signs that we're ready to break through. So in the overall market, again, we're looking for the upside to come through. On the Dow, we talked about this level across the top here. We got rejected on that today, which again lines up with the trend line on the S&P as well, where again, horizontal resistance, trend line resistance, both of the same sort of thing here across the board. Some tickers again are horizontal or trend line, but it's the same resistance at the exact same point. It's important to note here that everything got rejected. So even though even the Dow here got rejected, most of this though was tied to the energy side. And so when we saw energy this morning start to come down, this came down about 2% overall. It's still in the low end of the range here. Again, the more volatile of sort of banks and energy when you look at them, even though they're very similar chart, coming out of this sort of consolidation. Again, energy, the oil side, which affects sort of the energy sector the most, is in that little bit of a strange spot right now with the commodities in this super cycle sort of question mark of, does it continue? What do we do here? I don't think there's anything to really worry about here in terms of long positions. In terms of entering a position, it's definitely difficult taking these trades. You just have to stick with them, right? If you took this trade somehow today at open because we thought we were going bid, of course you're going to get stopped out of something like that. I had already entered back here. Some of these trades get stopped out. Talked about Exxon, for instance, getting stopped out. And so those things are going to happen here. This is, again, a long-term trade. This consolidation that's happening here, similar to the finance side, but again, having a little bit more weakness overall. The bank side, this candle, we'll see what this amounts to. We did this last week where we had this candle come down and sort of pivot then off the low, and we took buys here again. I don't think it's going to play out the same way. I do think we're breaking out of, again, we talked about this sort of bull flag through here. We already broke out of this a bit across the board, and this is the average again. When you look at individual tickers around sort of across the market, a lot of them are doing this bid and actually pushed all the way through and closed above. So we'll have to see what sort of movement and price action we have in store for the rest of the week. Again, the further you trade sideways, the sort of more you're pushing through that supply, and the better chance you are going to break through. So we'll have to see what that looks like as we get going. Again, you look at some of these, you're still within a very bullish sort of move here. Even what we looked at with Bank of America yesterday with this sort of idea of an ascending continuation triangle and putting points on. It's the fact that you put the bid on that matters the most, right? And so we'll look for those tomorrow because it is an interesting spot, and it's always interesting when we get a day like today that is just dominated by basically low volume. In terms of other tickers, do want to mention BA stayed exactly where it was, which is very nice. This is actually the exact same 1.39 that I talked about this morning. Was that it looked like that was it. That's probably where we're going to finish. We ended up putting a lot more points on, and even joked about it coming all the way up here. We ended up finishing off right there. That's a great candle to get going here. Now, this may have a bit of a stop, right? Something like BA here with this big move. A candle like this can be a little bit of a bearish sort of candle, and it can lead to a candle coming right down, possibly into the support here tomorrow. That does not mean that this trend is over, right? We're talking about one candle coming down and then continuing the move. Just like when we talk about when price goes through a support, we like to see it pull back and then bounce on it, right? Well, if we're talking about that on a daily sort of time schedule, well, then you're going to need 2 daily candles to form that sort of idea, right? And if you think back to when we were really being active with short-term trades, we would look for 1 daily candle, a red daily candle into support, and then we would buy on the next daily candle at open on the support and go from there, right? For this exact same sort of idea. I would say VA is most likely going to do that tomorrow, just based on what we've seen, sort of what the market did today. Otherwise, it's going to just push through extremely quickly. It's really one extreme or the other. It's not going to sit here tomorrow. That's not going to happen. So we'll see if that lines up with anything, but a very nice day there. Let me put it on the other list. Pot stocks were very interesting today. Something to keep in mind. I would say it's a sign of retail. Again, there's no one's touched pot stocks since retail started to only trade crypto. Now pot stocks are all of a sudden getting a lot of bid. Someone's buying, right? Someone has to buy it. It's mostly retail. We're going to keep our eye on this. Again, I prefer the GRWG chart. When you compare any chart, it is easily the best chart. And if you even do some sort of fundamental gymnastics, they are basically the only company that can acquire anybody because they have cash. And so they've just literally bought everybody in their market. And so those companies that are heavy on acquisitions on sort of an infancy of a sector usually do the best. And so same with, if you look at oil, right? You just buy everyone else, right? Standard Oil. That's it. Rockefeller. So let's keep an eye on what retail does and whether or not that actually does well or not is one thing. I just mean in terms of it's definitely something that we can take advantage of, right? Over here on the travel side, the same thing really happened here. We had a very big day. to start off, and we still finished up significantly higher. These are in a very interesting spot because you're right on sort of the sort of the high, right? You're at the upper end of the range. You're either going to break out here or swing back down, right? This area in here, right? This area here and here, right? You come up to the high, you swing back down. You come to the low, you swing back up. This time is a bit different. It is a bit different. Things have led up a little differently. You can see these candles formed a little differently. We have a lot more buyers. This definitely feels like the time we're going to break out of this area, which is why we've held through this pullback, really looking to push the advantage. We'll have to see. This candle can mean a lot of different things. Again, the bid is very bullish, but it coming off of an uptrend can lead to, sort of a pivot down to the downside. That doesn't mean, a long period of time, but it definitely could mean something. So it's really, we're again coming down to, are we going to have momentum here? Today's candle did not stop momentum. Again, a higher high and a higher low. That means momentum continued. That as long as that candle's higher, right, that's momentum. So tomorrow we're going to need to see the pace continue. I would say wherever price is open will indicate that. If we open above today's low, tomorrow at open, if we at least open above today's low, then we still have momentum to the upside. And these all still have a shot of putting significant amount of points on this week, right? We're talking about tomorrow putting points on, next day putting points on. So these short-term volatile trades like travel, they depend heavily on this momentum going to the upside. If these stop, then we're probably going to look to transition these, right? Because again, a little bit too much time is going past. These are riskier trades. We don't want to sit here and get pushed out of a position. They had a great day today. You don't get to guess where the top is today because some of them were up 4%, right? We were looking at these charts and they're up 4%. Some of those calls are up over 100%, right? The CCL calls are just an absolute mess. I don't know if anyone else is in these, but it's just an absolute mess. Some of them are up like 100%. Some of them are up like 400% if they were out of the money. Obviously didn't touch any of the out of the money ones, but there's definitely a lot sort of going on, and we'll see if, again, if the momentum continues. Otherwise, we're going to want to be a little careful and protect our downside because there's only so much we can do with these. You can't really trade your way out of those situations. So, we'll see. Last sector to talk about is semiconductors. The big question again has been, does this supply shortage actually lead to higher prices? And is that a good thing, right? It could be, it could be a bad thing, but it's good for the companies and their share price. Or it could be good in the sense that they're making more money, but it's bad because it sort of hurts the rest of the market and that causes the average to come down. We're not really seeing either, and I don't think anyone really knows still. So everything's been very technical still, which is good for us because we're just coming off the low and swinging back to the high, and it kind of just it's doing a we'll figure it out later sort of situation here when prices are not this kind of candles here. This is not like a problem being solved intraday, which is something like if we go take a look at the Moderna chart in a sec, you'll see that problem has been solved every single trading day. The prices are reflecting a problem being solved. These candles are not doing that. That's not what's happening on this chart or any of these charts. Even if you look at the average, that's not what's happening. This looks exactly the same as the average sort of tech chart, and there's really not anything being discussed here. So a nice day today overall on semis, and we're going to continue to push that from the low. Again, I think that you have a very high potential upside, especially look at something like AMD with retail coming in. It's not that hard to look at this chart and to see that there's a lot of upside potential here, in that the downside there's really nothing to worry about on the downside, right? We've held this support for ages. It's not going to break, right? It's very much like some of these other charts we've seen, like Netflix, where you got this low, buy it at the low and swing it to the high. And if it breaks through the high, then great. You get to push it further or buying something new, right? So we'll see, and we'll keep our eye open for if we start to see some battles. You'll see journalists do the the bull and bears are battling in the in supply of demand. We didn't see anything like that. So, and here's the Moderna side. So here's a good example of, again, the IPs get lifted. Anyone can make the vaccines. We have a lot of action, and then a lot of pricing in here that, again, you have moves in here that you can tell that it's not just sort of one way and it's being decided. No, there's problems being solved. For instance, when you bounce off the support like this, really wasn't truly support in here until we confirmed it. These moves, you have a candle like this, and then an inside bar here, and then we came down lower, and then we go up. It's up, down, and then you start to get this tightening in here, right? These sort of things where you start to see the consolidation go from uncertainty and then start to get sort of tightened in one way, and now it's getting to that point where a decision is going to be made. It's either going to go to the upside or the downside. I don't know which way it's going to go. All right. Beforehand, we were talking about Moderna going higher because of some interesting big ideas. Now you're in this, sort of what are we doing here idea, right? I'm not sure. So this is where the market gets to price something out, and we're going to continue to trade. If we trade through this whole apex here, then things will be a little bit slower, but I doubt we're going to wait all the way till up here. Things are going to happen here quickly. But just to put it in terms of the candle perspective of how some of those work. Fintech did well today as well. Again, overall, growth did well today. And so they held up their end of the bargain. The PayPal chart, 0.5% on the day. But again, this doji here, it puts a question of whether do we continue here, just too low volume to tell. So tomorrow we get to really figure out I would say tomorrow is going to dictate whether we do all-time high or not. Because if we get a stop candle tomorrow on the market, we can't lose points. If we lose too many points tomorrow, then it's probably not all-time high this week. But if we continue on this trend, then we absolutely will. Because again, if you just continue this trend to Friday, right here, that's all-time high. So if you continue this move, we'll reach all-time highs. And as soon as you hit it, we're going to burst through with momentum, right? So it's going to be very interesting. Again, I would say everything is dictated by the open. As usual, this is the Hang Seng from yesterday, almost 2%. It's going to probably take some profit, which is going to probably open us lower. So it's going to be up to whether this actually is a fluke or whether this is actually value that's going to get held. That will be, we'll see it in the morning. We don't even need to watch it. We'll see it when it opens. PDD, for instance, very bit up to start as well. That has earnings tomorrow. So some of these are going to be interesting. We'll get some volatility for sure coming from China, as always, recently. And that's about it, honestly. I think it was a nice trading day in terms of, I would say, just coming into the week, we had an idea and we've actually saw it take place, that just about everything was done on Monday. And this has happened, right? We've seen this where we go from a daily trading perspective where the same orders go on every day, and then they go to a weekly perspective where Monday is the day to get your orders done, heavy volume, and then nothing else happens the rest of the week. Every now and then you're buying dips and you're looking to do things, but it's really just low volume dictating big spreads, causing momentum to do a lot of interesting things, right? So that's all I've got, folks. An interesting day. I will see you guys in the morning. Very interested to see where we open, and we'll go from there, and we'll try to figure out what the hell's going on, because everything is pointing to all-time highs this week, but tomorrow's the day. So I will see you then. Enjoy your night.